This video is a production of Wheels by Fleming of San Jose, California, USA, home of hand-built basic and replacement alloy bicycle wheels. I'm your host, Robert Shackelford, aka Fleming, aka Mr. Rabbit. Today's video category is technical information.
Bicycle Wheel Dish Part 2. Hello there, welcome back to another video. This is Bicycle Wheel Dish Part 2. If you have not watched Part 1 first, you need to go back and watch that part first. Please do. That video in the form of a story gives you a fundamental overview of what's driving what we do when we actually dish bicycle wheels and why. So watch that video first. If you have already, well, stick around. 99.9999% of us ride bicycles that utilize symmetrical bicycle frames. Like I said in that first part, in that story, a symmetrical bicycle frame literally starts out as a line. Doesn't matter whether it's the factory or custom frame builder. It starts out literally as a line on a piece of paper. And there are three basic rules when designing that frame and building that frame. That symmetrical frame. Everything must be on the center line. Everything must be spread evenly across the center line. And if it can't be on the center line, then it needs to be parallel to the center line. Those are the basic rules. Those very same rules drive how we build and how we dish our bicycle wheels that we build. When you're building a bicycle wheel, you're not simply building a bicycle wheel. What you're really doing is you're complementing a bicycle. You are completing a bicycle, and you must follow the very same rules that symmetrical bicycle frame had to follow when it was designed and built. There are two types of dish. And you'll notice in my story I had two Mr. Dishes, not one. One screwed up, the other didn't. The first one screwed up because he was focused on the appearance form of dish, where we describe an appearance. That's why he screwed up. The other Mr. Dish built a proper wheel because he focused on the other form of dish, the verb form of dish, where an action is taken to make sure that the rim is centered between the lock nuts of a hub. He got it right. Now, a lot of people get confused by this, and the confusion is understandable. We're talking about two different things, appearance form and dish, verb form and dish, but we're using the same label, dish. Why is this happening? I think the real reason is that it's for lack of a better word for one of them. No one has yet been able to come up with a good label that works for one of them that people will adopt readily. So the confusion continues. I'm going to talk about the appearance form of dish first and give a few examples, and then I'm going to move on to the one that's actually relevant to wheel building. The appearance form of dish. It is not directly relevant to the process of building a bicycle wheel. If you focus on this one while building a bicycle wheel, you're going to screw up. I'm telling you that right now. You're going to get confused. And you're going to go chasing rabbits down a rabbit hole. Don't be like me. The first form of dish basically refers to this shape. The appearance of this shape. The shallow dish of a plate, the deep dish of a bowl. In a bicycle wheel, this is caused by the use of a dual flange hub. This hub has two flanges. Because this hub has two flanges, when the spokes leave the hub, they go to the rim at an angle. And that's where the appearance comes from. For example, here's a front BMX wheel. If I hold this BMX wheel sideways like this, you can see that the bottom side of this wheel has the rough appearance of dish, like you saw in the bowl earlier. And if I flip the wheel over, you see the exact same dish, rough appearance of dish. On this wheel, that rough appearance of dish is the same on both sides. We call this a wheel with a symmetrical appearance of dish because it's the same on both sides. This is one example. Again, it's caused by a dual flange hub. This is what causes it. Sometimes you're building a wheel on a hub where the flanges are not symmetrically set. They're asymmetrical. One flange is more inboard than the other. This is a 10-speed rear hub, and the drive side flange is more inboard to make room for 10 gears. This results in a different appearance of dish. I'll show you. Here it is. One side of this wheel has a deep appearance of dish, kind of like the bowl I showed you earlier. But if I flip it over to the drive side where the flange has been moved inboard, notice it's very flat, like a plate. This wheel has an asymmetrical appearance of dish. Flat on one side, deep on the other. Again, whether it's symmetrical, whether it's asymmetrical, it's irrelevant. The appearance of dish, that form of dish, is not directly relevant to the building of a bicycle wheel. Do not focus on that one. Now, there are people out there who might be talking to you right now or whispering in your ear saying, Mr. Rabbit's crazy, doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay, whatever. I was born in 1968. Bicycle wheels have existed and have been built long before I was even born. And the topic of dish existed before I was even born. And of course, this tool was invented long before I was born. This is a dishing tool. Some people call it a dish stick. Campanola was advertising these in the 1950s, and it stated exactly what it does to check the dish of a bicycle wheel. So, whoever's telling you I'm making stuff up, you got to explain to him, Mr. Rabbit's talking about stuff that existed before he was even born in 1968. I digress. Let's move on. Now I'm going to talk about the other form of dish, the verb form of dish, where you're taking an action to center the rim at the center point between the lock nuts of a hub. So if my nose is a rim and my fingers are lock nuts, when I properly build a bicycle wheel using the verb form of dish, I'm making sure my nose, the rim, is located at the midpoint or center point between the lock nuts of the hub. Just like I'm doing right now. Think of my nose as a rim, think of my two fingers as the lock nuts on the hub. My face is properly dished between these two fingers. Here's a front hub, dual flange. Here's a lock nut on one side, here's a lock nut on the other. The center point between these two lock nuts is right about here in the middle of the hub shell. When I build this hub into a front wheel, I have to make sure that when I dish this wheel, that my rim resides at the very midpoint of this hub shell, which is also at the very midpoint between the two lock nuts. That's what I have to do. On this rear 10-speed hub, same rule applies. I'm going to ignore the fact that this hub flange is more inbound. I'm going to ignore the fact that this flange is more outbound. I'm going to ignore that. I'm paying attention to the lock nuts on this rear hub when I build this hub and when I build the wheel, when I dish this wheel. Same rule applies. When I build this hub into a rear wheel, I must make sure that that rim resides at the midpoint between the two lock nuts on this hub. Notice the midpoint is no longer in the middle of the hub shell. It's actually over to one side now, closer to the drive side flange. But that's not my concern. My concern is making sure that that rim in this wheel resides at the center point between the lock nut here and the lock nut there. If I do that with this hub in a wheel, I end up with a properly dished wheel. The most common tool used to check this is this tool right here, a dishing tool or a dish stick. There are other ways to check, but I'm just going to cover this one for today. All this dishing tool does, or dish stick does, all it does is do a symmetry test. That's all it does. It just checks for symmetry. So here's my wheel already built. So I'm going to check to see if this rim is at the center point between the lock nuts of the hub. So I'm putting the dishing tool on. I'm dropping this little pointer thing onto the lock nut on one side, and I'm locking it, and I'm turning it over. If this wheel is properly bished, when I put the tool on the other side, that little barrel there or point should rest on the lock nut on the other side, and it does. This tool is telling me that the rim on this wheel does reside between the two lock nuts on the hub. This wheel is properly dished. If I take this properly dished bicycle wheel and I put this into a symmetrical bicycle with a symmetrical frame, center it and lock the crick pulleys, the entire wheel from front all the way back will be on the center line of that frame. It will respect the center line. And the result will be that that bicycle, symmetrical frame equipped bicycle, will ride true, will ride straight. It will not pull to one side. It will not pull to the other side, even when ridden hands-free. The same applies to the front wheel. So that's the verb form and dish. Once again, the verb form and dish is where I'm taking that action necessary to make sure that the rim lies at the center point between the lock nuts of the hub. Again, pretend my nose is a rim, pretend my fingers are the lock nuts of a hub. If my nose is centered at the exact midpoint between these two fingers, my nose is properly dished between these two fingers. Just using that example. Now I'm going to continue on to a couple other things. Every 5, 6, 7, 8 years, a gimmick is brought back to life. This gimmick, sometimes I call it a zombie, is called the zero dish or no dish wheel. Let me tell you right now, there is no such thing as a zero dish wheel. There is no such thing as a no dish wheel. But you will hear this term, and you will hear people talk about it. And you'll even run into people who try to sell you on the idea and even try to do it for you, promising you that it will fix a problem. I'm going to tell you right now, bad idea. Because what they will do is they will fix something that ain't broke. They're trying to sell you a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist. I'll explain. What is this zero dish idea? Well, let me pick up this wheel again. A lot of people out there don't like this kind of wheel. This is that 10-speed rear asymmetrical wheel that's used in 10-speed road bikes. And of course, the spokes are flatter on one side, and there's a deeper dish on the other side in terms of appearance. Now, the result of creating this space for 10-speed gearing has resulted in the flange on that side being moved inboard. And in order for me to keep this wheel centered between the lock nuts of this hub, I had to have the spokes on the drive side tighter and the spokes on the non-drive side, the other side, looser. That's what I had to do to make sure this wheel is properly dished in the verb sense, the technical sense. A lot of people don't like this. The fact that the spokes on one side are really loose irritates people. It annoys people. They don't like that. But for this wheel, that isn't a necessity. That's what has to happen to allow this wheel to be properly dished in the verb sense, in the technical sense. So someone will come along and try to sell the idea of zero dish or no dish. What will they try to do? What they will do is they will take all these spokes on the non-drive side that are really loose, and they'll give them a few turns. They'll tighten them up and pull this rim over, increasing the tension on the non-drive side. They'll even loosen the spokes a little bit on the drive side. And they will claim that in doing so, they create a better wheel, a stronger wheel, where the tension's equal. Wrong. So, here's what happens when someone tries to do a zero dish or no dish wheel. It'll end up looking like this. Same wheel, but now notice there's a lot more dish on the drive side. There's a lot less appearance of dish on the non-drive side. The spokes are tighter on the non-drive side. The tension's better. But here's the problem. When you create a zero dish, no dish wheel, from a technical standpoint, from the verb dish standpoint, the actual dish that's required, this rim is no longer centered between the lock nuts of the hub. This rim is now off center. That person was claiming to sell you a solution to a problem. Wrong. What he did was he fixed what ain't broke, and he didn't sell you a solution. He actually sold you a problem. Because now if I were to take this wheel, which is now about 3/4 of an inch off center, and stick this into a symmetrical bicycle frame and line it up behind the seat tube and close that crick release, the back end of this wheel will be about 1.25 inches off the center line. It will be at an angle to the center line of the symmetrical bicycle frame we just put it in. What will the result be? A bicycle will no longer ride true. It will no longer ride straight. If you go through water and create some tracks, you'll see 2 tracks, not 1. The bike will pull to one side or the other, even more so if you go hands-free. Furthermore, because the wheel's at an angle to the center line, the gears are no longer parallel to the center line. You get increased drivetrain noise, increased drivetrain wear. It literally messes up the handling and efficiency of the entire bike. Zero dish wheel is a gimmick. It's a bad idea. If someone tries to sell it to you, walk away. Here's the other problem with this concept, this gimmick of zero dish, no dish wheel. No such thing exists. There are no zero dish wheels. There are no dish wheels. I'll explain. All bicycle wheels that use a dual flange hub, they have 2 flanges, will have 2 forms of dish. Because this has 2 flanges, it will have the appearance of dish created by the spokes going at an angle to the rim. And if properly dished, it will have the verb form of dish. Its rim will be centered between the lock nuts of the hub. The majority of the bicycle wheels we ride on are dual flange hub equipped wheels. They have 2 forms of dish in them. Some of us ride bicycle wheels that have only 1 flange on the hub. These hubs are used in solid disc rims, like carbon ceramic solid disc rims. A lot of them are used in those single speed fixie wheels that have those 4 or 5 or 6 fixed spokes in the wheel, those nice big white spokes on them. solid, not wire spokes, those wheels tend to use a single flange hub. So they will not have an appearance of dish because you don't have spokes coming at an angle to the rim. It won't have the appearance of dish. However, those wheels must still be properly dished in the verb sense. The rims on those solid spoke, solid disc wheels still have to be at the center point of the lock nuts on the hub they're built around. Those wheels will have one type of dish in them. Again, there's no such thing as a zero dish or no dish wheel. They don't exist. So I'm going to wrap this up for you. 99.999999% of the bicycles that we ride have symmetrical frames. That is what drives what we do with our bicycle wheels. Our bicycle wheels are built to complement those symmetrical bicycle frames. Bicycle wheels have two forms of dish. There are two forms of dish. There's the appearance of dish, where the spokes on one side or the other, when flipped horizontally, will have one of these shapes, roughly. But that is not relevant to the technical process of building a bicycle wheel. Then you have the other form of dish, the verb form of dish, where you're taking that rim and you're centering it between the lock nuts of the hub. That is the technical form of dish. That is the one that is directly relevant to building a bicycle wheel. There's a gimmick out there that people call zero dish or no dish wheel. It's a gimmick. Bad idea. Don't let anyone do that to your bicycle. And finally, that very label, zero dish, no such thing exists. All bicycle wheels have dish. Wheels built with dual flange hubs will have two types of dish in them. Wheels that are constructed around a single flange hub will have one type of dish in it, the verb form, the correct form. That's all for today. Wherever you are, have a wonderful day or a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can visit my website at www.mrrabbit.net. Follow the link for Wheels by Fleming, and on the Wheels by Fleming main page at the bottom is my email address. Use that to shoot me an email.